Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webcast. My name is Christine Dorsey Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio chapter of APA, and I am your webcast moderator. Today, we will be hearing the presentation, State and Local Planning for Energy. This is the SLOPE program, exploring the new clean energy planning platform from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. For technical help during today's webcast, you can type your questions in the chat box found in your GoToWebinar at the right-hand side of your screen. And for your content questions related to the presentation, you can again just type those in that chat box in your webinar toolbar, and we will answer those at the end of the presentation during the Q&A. Today's webcast is sponsored by the Colorado chapter of APA. So thanks to the Colorado chapter for hosting today and getting this together and making this webcast possible. And I do know that the Colorado chapter actually has some more sessions coming down the pipeline, which will you'll hear about here shortly. So thanks to Colorado for joining us today. Coming up next on your screen is a list of our next upcoming webcast. So there's one listed right now for the 20th of March, and I'm going to be entering later this afternoon several more that we have coming through. So be sure to watch out for that. Head over to ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast for the latest list of our sessions, and you just click on the green title there to register for those. And I'll also point out this is a screenshot of our webcast webpage. If you hit the second tab, prior webcasts, you'll be able to download PDF copies of our previous sessions. The distance education tab, we have one session available for law and one session for ethics. Both are worth 1.5 CM credits for on-demand distance education. So click on that distance education tab for more info on that. And this session has been approved. Today's session has been approved for 1.5 CM credits. To log those CM credits, just head over to planning.org and log into your My APA account. And then from there, you can search either by today's title or the event number. The event number is listed there. And if you have trouble finding either one of those, again, just head over to our webcast webpage. Both of those will be listed for you in case you have trouble searching. And let's be friends. Like us on Facebook for up-to-date information on our sessions, and click the red button. Subscribe to us on YouTube. We have over 2,000 subscribers and over 300 videos available for you to view from our previous webcast sessions. And this session is also being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel. So with that, I am going to be turning it over to today's speaker, but first we're going to do a quick poll. We're just going to check and see kind of where everyone is at in terms of their job, just so Megan, our presenter, our panelist, kind of knows what who she's got on the line today. You're few but mighty who have ventured to their computer today in light of all the things that are happening. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll. So right there on your screen, you can just select public sector, private, nonprofit, academic, other. I'll just give it a few seconds here and then I'll show the results so that you all also know who else is on the line with you. Give it just another second. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll, and then I'm going to share our results. Okay, so it looks like 61% of us are in the public sector, 31% private, 2% nonprofit, 2% academic, 4% other. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hide this, and then I am going to give the controls over to Megan Day, who is our panelist today. She will be introducing herself and kind of kicking us off. So Megan, the floor is yours.
Okay,
and don't forget to unmute yourself. Okay.
Thanks, Christine. Are you seeing my screen okay?
Yep, everything looks great.
Fabulous. All right. Well, thank you to the roughly 250 folks who have joined us on this crazy day. So I wanna thank you for taking some time to be here with us today. And let's just take a moment in this chaotic time and day to take a deep breath. There's been a lot going on, and for those of you listening to a recording, this is March 13th, Friday, March 13th, and there's been all kinds of announcements yesterday as to closings and cancellations so that we don't spread the coronavirus. So let's just take a deep breath. Okay. And congratulate ourselves for taking some time in this chaotic moment to be productive remotely. We are social distancing, but we're still learning. I'm looking forward to learning from you and your questions that you have in the Q&A session at the end. And I hope that you can learn from these tools and platforms that I'll be introducing to you. So thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. My name is Megan Day. I am the Senior Energy Planner at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Golden, Colorado. I am a certified planner, and of course, I focus on clean energy planning. And the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, or NREL, is one of 17 national laboratories within the Federal Department of Energy system. We are a nonprofit managed facility, so I'm not a Fed, but my laptop is, this building you're looking at is, this is my office building that was closed yesterday for the coronavirus. So I'm working from home, and so bear with me. I've tried to set it up so hopefully my internet won't die and we can continue on here. NREL is the only national laboratory of the 17 that is dedicated exclusively to research, analysis, and deployment work in renewable energy, energy efficiency, and sustainable transportation. And it is under those auspices that we have this state and local planning for energy platform, or the SLOPE platform, that is supported by multiple Department of Energy, energy efficiency, and renewable energy offices, including the solar, wind, water power, geothermal, weatherization, and vehicles offices, all coming together to provide support and guidance in NREL's implementation of this project. I will take some time at the end to introduce some other resources that have come online recently and hopefully will be of help to you in state and local clean energy planning. So let's move on here to the SLOPE platform. I've got a bunch of slides that Christine will go through in case we crash here on the internet. But basically, I'm going to launch right into the live website so that we can take a look at the actual site rather than a bunch of slides. So we've talked a little bit about the SLOPE platform, but the purpose is really to provide easily accessible, low barrier to entry, no training necessary, data and analysis to support state and local clean energy planning. Many of you probably have some pretty ambitious goals when it comes to clean energy, and we want to be able to support data-driven decisions to help you achieve your goal. And that is the basis of SLOPE, the State and Local Planning for Energy platform. So welcome to SLOPE. This is the live website that we're looking at now. And you can get there from the address above, but I would encourage you to take a look at how we manipulate through the site, because there's some tricks to it that make it much easier to use. So the State and Local Planning for Energy, or SLOPE platform, is described in the About page here. It's looking to integrate lots of data and analysis from multiple different offices and publications and research projects and integrate them at jurisdictional levels. You'll see there are three main components of this site. We've got a map that is generally a chloroplast map, so that its purpose here is to compare your jurisdiction to other jurisdictions, right? At this point, we have state and we have county jurisdictions shown. We're going to be adding city in the coming months where we have that data available. So we've got the map, we've got the chart, and we've got the data layers. So three main components of slope to help you navigate your way through this data. We have a beta version up right now. You'll see the beta counter here. And so that means that we just launched on December 31st, and we are working on this. It's a work in progress. And so we really want your input as to how we can improve it, where there might be glitches, and what your needs are that we might be able to support. So if you see this feedback tab, that's one way to give us feedback as to how we can improve upon this platform, this beta platform. There's also the email, slope@nrel.gov. I'll get those emails and would love to hear from you with any questions, suggestions. And even for those of you who are interested, I'd love to have some panelists join me in the next time that I present Slope to help me and our audience understand how you might be using this platform in your planning processes. All right, so let's dive in. As I said, we have this map. Many of them have a time scale for the data that we're presenting here. So you can see it change over time. And the state and county resolution. And then the chart down below here, where we've got the map legend, a little far away from the map, and the chart legend. And everything has a description. We're linking back to the original research or tools or websites from which this data is derived. I'd like to tell a story to kind of introduce you to the platform and give an example of how it might be used. I know many of you, and we've realized this actually in our research, that at local jurisdictional level planning, you make big goals, you have a major plan that's maybe gone through a public process, and you have generally what we find with cities is that there's a laundry list of actions. And state or local planners are often working at, furiously trying to implement those action steps, right? Slope is really more of a higher level, bigger picture platform. It may not be as useful to you in implementing those very detailed, specific action steps, but it can encourage you and enable you to look a little bit broader at what are your opportunities and potential when it comes to clean energy transition. So I hope you'll use it in that way instead of getting frustrated that it's not, helping you with your very specific actions that everybody is kind of overwhelmed with, right? So let's tell a story. This is totally hypothetical, not based on any real plan or goal. Let's say I am from the state of Colorado, right? And at whatever level of government or nonprofit even. And we have an ambitious clean energy goal, right? Say it is a 2035 clean energy goal. And we want to have 100% clean energy, electricity, say, by 2035. What I'll do first is show you, okay, we're at the state level, and we're in Colorado. Up here we have energy consumption. What we've done is model electricity and natural gas consumption and expenditures for every state, county, and city. So that city data is coming soon in the U.S. It's a little bit worse for Alaska and Hawaii because of data availability. We had to do it by county in Hawaii, and Alaska sometimes we're missing some data. But we did the best we could for the entire U.S. And the goal here was to provide model data. This is not measured. We have not gone to all 3,000 plus utilities and gotten that data from the utility. So if you have measured data, it will be better. But this is in an attempt to provide standardized, localized, estimated data such that maybe it saves some smaller jurisdictions from spending a year and a half and all the associated time and funds to get the actual data and conduct an emissions inventory, for example, and spend all that time. This is a decent approximation such that local jurisdictions who don't have the staff capacity or resources to do this could take this as an approximation, as well as regional planning organizations can look at multiple jurisdictions within their planning region to see a standardized estimate of consumption, emissions, and renewable energy potential and efficiency potential. So back to Colorado. I'm in the state of Colorado. I'm wondering, what does my consumption look like such that I can plan to cover at least electricity at first with clean energy resources? So here we have modeled electricity and natural gas consumption by sector. I've got the residential, and here I tried to match it with the planning colors, right? We've got residential sector in yellow and orange, and this is electricity at the bottom, natural gas for the residential sector, commercial electricity, and natural gas, and then industrial here on the top. And this is projected out from a 2017 or 2016 baseline all the way out to 2050 in one case so far. We're looking to expand that as we move forward and add capabilities to this platform. So it's projected out to 2050 in a business as usual case, right? So we're looking at the annual energy outlook, reference case, and the energy intensity per household and per establishment for these sectors. With a bottom-up, top-down approach to modeling this kind of consumption over time. So I can see in Colorado that I'm pretty even, right, between sectors and energy resources, electricity and natural gas consumption. Whereas some other places, that's not the case, right? Let's look at Indiana, where they have much higher industrial consumption. So if you took this as a per capita, and you can see this, which in the map here, right? What we're mapping out is the total MMBTU for electricity and natural gas for each state. So I looked at Indiana and thought, okay, it doesn't have as much of a population as these other states here, particularly Illinois with Chicago, Texas, lots of industry, California with huge population. So why was that? And the reason is this: lots of industrial energy consumption in Indiana. But with Colorado, it's much more evenly matched, right? So here I can see that if I want all renewable energy, and some states and localities are setting all renewable energy goals by 2050, meaning including the transportation sector and building end uses like cooking and heating, I've got some work to do on natural gas for all sectors, fairly even amount of work, right? If I really have a goal to transfer it entirely to clean energy across all sectors, not just electricity. So I can have an estimate of what that might look like over time. All right, then I can look at what's that translate into as far as dollars spent. Obviously, there's different rates for different sectors. So sometimes you'll see this industrial sector shrink, right? Because they have lower rates for utilities than the residential sector. So if I'm focused on savings in dollars, I want to make sure I'm looking at this as well. Okay, Then how might my population look over time? Colorado, and this is a smart axis, so we're not shooting off the charts here. It does not start at 0. But Colorado is obviously projected to change over time, right, as far as population. So how might that look at the county level? Well, current population, and this is a 2015 model, is of course along the Front Range, and we can see that consumption is also concentrated, obviously, in those areas. And by 2050, still population will be concentrated in these areas across the state where there are larger cities. So here we can kind of have a chloropleth comparative map to look at how that's changing over time. And population, same thing. So here, maybe I understand that as a state, I might want to be focusing some of my resources on these counties where there's more consumption and higher rates of growth projected, right? All right, let's go back out into state. And let's look at energy efficiency. There's 2 main data sets here in the energy efficiency potential. This is from an Electric Power Research Institute study on the state level energy efficiency by sector. So you can see here, again, we have projected efficiency over time by sector with the residential, commercial, and industrial sectors. Now the bandwidth here is based on how much of an incentive is placed on efficiency and a dollar per megawatt range. So we have a 0, which is the bottom of this band, to a $20 per megawatt incentive, and looking at how that might change these sectors over time. So here I can see that in the state of Colorado, we have lower industrial energy efficiency potential, highest in the commercial, and the broadest range or sort of sensitivity to incentives is in the residential sector. This is generally the case across most states because there's just so many more buildings, as most planners know, in the residential sector, right? And so on a per building basis, if you apply an incentive, it means a greater adoption rate and impact of that potential incentive. Could also mean a lot more money going towards incentives on a per, if you count up all those buildings. But I do have high potential in the commercial sector, so we might want to look at some incentives or programs or policies that impact the commercial sector as far as gigawatt hour energy savings potential from efficiency. Now, there are 2 data sets, however, in this one. What we're seeing now is economic potential, and this is assuming that every commercial enterprise and every residential building adopts economic efficiency measures. And we all know that that's not going to happen. So it's much more effective to look at the high achievable potential, right? High achievable potential, as it describes down here in the description, is based on looking at historic rates of energy efficiency potential or actual achievement, right? So you'll see that the scale is a bit lower, but we're still at the same sort of comparative potential between the sectors. So I would encourage you to look at high achievable potential because it's more based in reality as to what you might be able to achieve as a state. Let's look at this also projected over time, right? So we're seeing the total energy efficiency savings potential by state, and we projected it out through this study to 2035. So Colorado is kind of in the mid-range, right, for energy savings potential from the modeled energy efficiency measures that were all economic. And other states in the Southeast, highly populated states, et cetera, have pretty high potential for energy savings, a little higher than Colorado, particularly over time. Okay, well, that's interesting. Maybe I can set some goals that roughly reflect some of this high achievable potential in the various sectors. Let's move on to some analysis that we did at NREL using supercomputing potential and a model of 350,000 different prototype single-family residential homes, right? So what we're looking at is the ResStock research, and this shows both electricity savings potential from economic measures, these are cost-saving measures over time, and home fuel savings potential from this research. So it looks like, again, Colorado is kind of in the mid-range. That's probably because we don't have super high population, super high consumption, as you see along sort of the Midwest here and the Great Lakes. But we also don't have a very high heating load and cooling load. It's not that cold in the winter, it's not that hot in the summer. We don't have a lot of buildings with air conditioning necessarily. So we're kind of in the middle range. But let's look down here at what my potential is as far as the most impactful energy savings measures in single-family homes. Right now we're looking at electricity saving measures, and we can see that LED lighting, so there's still a lot of potential for switching out incandescent and CFLs to LEDs, and that looks like the highest potential for economic energy efficiency measures in single-family homes, followed by a host of other measures that change depending on which state you're in, right? In Texas, it's a different set, but it's still LED at the top, and followed by a lot of insulation. Often the same with fuel savings. So here in Texas, drill and fill tends to be the top. If we go back up to Colorado, same thing, drill and fill is the highest energy savings potential measure for single-family homes according to our modeling. Okay, so that means maybe I focused some of our efforts on targeting these most cost-effective and energy savings potential measures for the state of Colorado in single-family homes. Now, for each of these data sets, you can look up details on the data, and here we have some of the legends, more details on those acronyms, links to the reports, state fact sheets for more data, a viewer for that, all kinds of information. You can also download the data, right? So that will pull down a download bar, and you can see it downloading here. It'll download all the data for all the states, so you can still compare. So we try to make this as accessible so that you can dig further into all the details as possible, but still provide a very high-level overview of your opportunity and potential. Okay, we have data on the commercial building sector. We have some rough approximation of data for the residential and industrial data and sectors in the state and local energy data site. Some of you may have used the SLED site, right? This provides data for cities, every single US city, 23,400 cities roughly. And you can look up a whole host of information on city-specific data, including approximations of residential and industrial sector data. What we've done here is provide the most recent and we thought the best data that we could find for commercial buildings. And so that's integrated here. The SLED, basically SLOPE, is SLED 3.0. The SLED site is built on outdated technology and will be going away in the future. So we're looking to provide and build a new and improved, but all together redesigned and improved as far as planning potential site in the SLOPE site. But there's still a lot of data available, at least to the end of this calendar year, on the SLED site. So I'd encourage you to go there. But let's look at the state level commercial buildings data. All right, so again, here we have a comparison of the number of buildings and the square feet of those buildings, looking a little different, and it's projected out over time how that might change. And again, kind of a business as usual growth. So we're seeing here that in Colorado, that growth is increasing for commercial buildings. Make sure you look at the range here, though. It's not necessarily as steep an increase as it might look given the scale. It's a smart scale and it will change. So there we might be able to set some kind of metrics, right? So looking at the commercial sector, that's obviously where I have the highest energy efficiency potential. Maybe I can look at a percentage of our buildings that we would hope would adopt certain measures to tackle that energy efficiency potential. Or we might set that metric on a square foot basis and know that that will have a greater impact over time as Colorado is expected to grow. All right, so that's the consumption and efficiency side of slope. Let's move into what I think is pretty unique for kind of tools and data that are out there in this aggregation of utility scale and other scale renewable energy technical generation potential. What we have here is technical generation potential, and the notes that should require a little bit of explanation, right? There are different levels of potential. And what we've tried to do here is move from the resource potential, which is basically how much sunlight is falling on Colorado, to a technical potential, which pairs that resource, right? How strong is our solar resource or our wind resource with some land use analysis. Yay, planning land use analysis. So that we are basically shifting from watts per meter squared to actual generation. So you'll see the unit here is megawatt hours. And it takes into consideration what's going on the land. So we're not assuming that we can actually generate utility scale PV, in this example, on water bodies, on protected parks, on urban areas, on high slopes. So we've done a lot of exclusions and then looked at, okay, what's the resource potential for generation or the technical generation potential for Colorado. It looks like Colorado has good resource or generation potential, comparative. It's kind of, again, a little bit in the middle. Where is that resource in my state as far as across the country or across the state? It looks like in Colorado, as far as across my state, we've got a lot of generation potential on the eastern plains. And that's probably because it's pretty flat out there. There's not a lot of national park land out there. There's a lot of available unurbanized land out there. So it might not be the best solar resource, which tends to be down here in the San Luis Valley, but it is lots of generation potential because of that land area. Now, we don't take into consideration interconnection potential in this technical generation potential. That is taken into consideration in the levelized cost of electricity. So that is taking into consideration, and we'll get to that in a second, how far you might be from an interconnection point, and that makes your cost of electricity higher for the different technologies. All right, so Colorado, going back to our planning example here, now we're at the county level. And you can see these different technologies. We have 3 technologies mapped at the county level. Concentrating solar potential, which is the highest in Colorado, and some other states, and surprisingly, not necessarily just the Southwest. Utility scale PV and land-based wind we have at the county level. For the state level, we have many more technologies mapped out, right? So concentrating solar is the highest, followed by utility scale PV, land-based wind. And then, this is what I want to make sure you know. I'm going to click off some of these resources so we can see some more detail, right? It's a dynamic legend for both the map and the chart here. And now I can see that my 4th highest generation potential technology is hydropower in the state of Colorado, followed by biopower and rooftop PV, floating PV, and finally geothermal potential. So we've got all of these technologies over here on the right there's a description of them, right, for each of these technologies. So it'll tell you what are the assumptions here. And that's pretty important to understand when you're looking at planning. So let's take a look at this floating PV, right? That is a NREL research project where we looked at, you can look down here, man-made water bodies. And what is the potential for suitable floating solar generation on those man-made water bodies at a state level? So here, there is a decent potential in Colorado for floating solar. Some of the highest, however, is elsewhere. Florida, there's a lot of sort of man-made water bodies in Florida, retention ponds and the like, and some other areas. Also interesting to look at potential here, technical generation potential, is offshore wind. Colorado is out of luck when it comes to offshore wind, obviously. But we can see that there's a very high potential here along the Gulf Coast, the eastern seaboard, and also the Great Lakes. And with Massachusetts having very high resource, New York actually has higher offshore wind generation potential than land-based wind. And that's because they have both offshore in the Great Lakes and in the Atlantic Ocean here. Well, let's get back to Colorado. That's what we're focused on, right? And look at maybe hydro potential. So, okay, hydro potential, we're pretty high. Looks like concentrating solar is the highest generation potential as far as megawatt hours. What does that mean for cost? Maybe I want to explore concentrating solar. So let's go down to look at what we've modeled for cost. Now here we have an estimate of the levelized cost of electricity by technology, projected out over time. Almost all of these maps are dominated by geothermal, which obviously has a very high range. We're modeling out the low to the mid-range, so the median, pricing for each technology. Well, obviously geothermal is pretty expensive in Colorado. So I'd like to look at what the other technologies are. So I'm going to click off geothermal and take a look at what these other technologies are looking like. This is concentrating solar. So I might have the highest resource potential or generation potential in concentrating solar in Colorado. But right now, other than geothermal, it's the highest cost technology. It's projected to come down over time, but it's still not going to be as low cost as land-based wind, hydropower. And then if we click off land-based wind, we can see the utility scale PV there in yellow. So this tells me that if I'm looking to really save costs and generate electricity from the lowest cost technology, and these do include fossil fuel technologies as well. Black is coal, we've got nuclear, light blue is natural gas in different forms. In Colorado, as in many places, hydropower generation is the lowest cost technology. Now, what we're assuming here, and there's all kinds of assumptions that have to go into this, especially on levelized cost of electricity, and they're described here and in a write-up that you can access through the description. We're assuming in almost every generation technology, new construction. So the hydropower, however, is assuming new construction of small hydro. So we're looking at non-powered dams, and you can see the details here. Looking at non-powered dams as well as upgrades to existing hydropower facilities. So that's a little bit of a deviation from the other assumptions here. So as my fourth highest generation potential from technical generation potential, right, in Colorado, this is hydropower down there. It's not very high, but it's very low cost. So I might want to look at where can I develop some small scale run-of-river or existing non-powered dams. Maybe I can add some hydropower generation to those to get the lowest cost generation in my state, as this model is estimating. Okay, let's look quick before we leave LCOE, which is, you know, it's an estimate. It's pretty much wrong, I can tell you, at least for like utility scale solar. If you issue an RFP, you're not going to get these kind of prices, but you will get roughly sort of the relative rates, right? You can tell that some resources are higher cost in this modeling than others. And so you might want to target those to actually get some details for RFPs for actual generation. But let's look at land-based wind, right? That is, if we're in an actual state where there's a land-based wind potential, right? And we look at levelized cost of energy, land-based wind has the steepest decline, right? I'm sorry, offshore wind. Offshore wind for Massachusetts, right? Which has a lot of offshore wind generation potential. And it's coming down steeply over time is that projection. Still looks like it may be a little more expensive than land-based wind. So that's something to consider as we're thinking big scale generation potential and planning over time, right? So I'm going to pull out here and look at levelized cost of energy across the state. Now, what we've done in the map here for levelized cost of energy is take a look at what is the modeled, again, this is all an estimate, lowest cost of electricity generation, which is the technology that has the lowest cost, whatever, we've got 2050 here. So hydro is this lighter blue. Still the lowest cost modeled technology over time by 2050, except now we've got the Midwestern states and some of these other states with land-based wind as the lowest cost technology. And we've got some solar. We've also done this at a balancing area level, so we can see how that breaks out within states over time. So you can see that hydro is still the lowest cost potential in many places within the state, but wind is a greater potential, and solar is kind of specialized there. But again, all a model, all a model. We also have modeled battery storage costs. It's going to be the same for every jurisdiction, right? And let's pull out to Colorado again. Battery storage costs projected to decline over time for sure. So if you're looking at storage as part of that generation mix, that's definitely an opportunity. Okay, that is a pretty in-depth introduction to the SLOPE tool, and I really look forward to some questions as to how you might use it to help you in your energy planning. Again, it's large scale, big picture, focused on projections and potential so that you can maybe shift from getting in the weeds for all those lots of different action steps to taking a bigger look at what might some potential be that maybe you weren't aware of. And so you could start to be more strategic and data-driven in your energy planning. That's our goal, to help support you in doing that. More data-driven, clean energy transition planning. All right, I am going to shift now to focus on some of the other resources and data sets that we have available. So please write in some questions on SLOPE as we move along here. But I'd like to now quickly shift to a few different resources for other forms of planning, right? All right, I'm going to have to crank through this. I was worried I would lose my connection, and so Christine would be leading this this process. So, okay, I'm going to show you some of the ways that you can model out data for your local jurisdiction we're moving on to the state and local energy profiles. This is a suite of different data sets that is basically the baseline data for slope for many of those models that we just saw projected over time. This is more detailed baseline data for generally a 2016 vintage. And what we have here is modeled electricity and natural gas consumption and expenditures by sector. And we've got them here for, it's a lookup table basically, right? You can go to this link and you'll see the suite of data sets here. And what you're doing here on OpenEI is downloading a big file because it's got all the data in there for every city and every county in the state from our modeled data. So here we're going to take a look at what are the outputs of some of these data sets, right? If you go there and download the data set, you can look up your city, and I've got Kingston, New York, which we've been doing some work with. And here I'm modeling electricity and natural gas expenditures and consumption over time. The gray bars are looking at that consumption or expenditure compared to a cohort of other cities with a similar climate zone and population. We can see that this bar here is the average for the cohort. Kingston has not much industrial consumption going on there compared to the average in their cohort, but a fair amount of commercial consumption for electricity as an example, and hardly any natural gas consumption compared to other folks in the commercial sector. Here we also have one of the big components of slope that we're working on building in this year. We want to be able to support comprehensive energy planning, and so we'll be building in transportation data for slope as well as projected grid mix data. So we have modeled already state by state projected grid mix by technology. So we're looking at many different scenarios of what that grid mix will look like as far as how much coal or natural gas, solar, rooftop PV, you name it. What will that generation mix look like modeled out through 2050 for your state? That's another piece of slope that we're hoping to integrate. But for now, you can access a lot of this baseline transportation data from this site. So here we have modeled on-road gasoline and diesel consumption for each city and county for Kingston here, again, compared to a cohort, and vehicle miles traveled modeled within that jurisdiction for every city and county. So you can pull that data for whichever jurisdiction you want in this modeled form for a 2016 baseline. You can also look at, again, this 2016 baseline. This is an abbreviated estimated emissions inventory, essentially. So maybe what this can offer folks is a shortcut. If you want to just make some decisions that are data-based, this might be good enough. As a model, again, this is not measured energy consumption, but it is a model. And we're looking at electricity, natural gas, and on-road vehicle fuel consumption for each city and county in the US. And this is by sector for electricity and natural gas and fuel. So again, you can download those data sets at this link. We'll get you that link in the PDF. Then we have a whole nother data set in that suite of data that's looking at light duty vehicle, alternative fuel vehicle adoption. I know that's a question that a lot of cities and counties and states are dealing with. Is what will our particularly electrification of vehicles look like over time? That impacts both your emissions, but it also impacts your electricity consumption. We're looking at integrating this kind of data projected over time into slope, but for now we have some historical data that's modeled for each city and county that you can download. So here we have the different fuel types, right? for light-duty vehicles, broken out by cars, trucks, and all light-duty vehicles combined. So for cars in Kingston, New York, you can see, as in many jurisdictions, flex fuel vehicles increased dramatically. Doesn't mean that they actually use that flex fuel, which is actually fairly rare, we found. But also followed by hybrid electric, not quite as steep of an increase as some other communities. Diesel fuel vehicles, this is adoption over time through 2016. So that, we also have electric vehicles, is purple. So not quite showing up on the map here for Kingston. It's down here in the very small range. But you can download the data and get all of those detailed percentages. This is not as much of a model as the others because it's based on actual collected data from Polk IHS. We cannot, because that is a proprietary purchase data set, provide you all the raw data, but we've converted into percentages, and you can access all those detailed percentages as well as estimated fuel economy for the vehicles registered over time, which is what you're seeing down here. All right, and finally, there's two more data sets in that suite. One is commercial building inventory. We saw that on slope, but here's some further detail that's not on slope. We've got commercial buildings by type or use, and count, and vintage. When were they constructed? So here we can see, you know, if you have efficiency measures that you want to target for the commercial sector, you might want to be targeting towards less efficient, older buildings and the like, and there's some data there that you can use. Okay, and now let's move on to the final data set in this suite, which is the Renewable Electricity Procurement Options data, or this is the REPOD data lookup tool. Here what we've done is conducted an analysis of all cities and counties, what their utilities are, what their renewable procurement options are, and if they have a franchise agreement. And if we have it, we have 3,500 different cities for which we researched this. What is the expiration date of that franchise agreement, such that those cities might be able to use that opportunity as a leverage point and a discussion point to maybe include some renewable or clean energy goals in that renewal of the franchise agreement, or at least an opportunity to enter into discussions with your utility. So here, as an example, or still in Kingston, as this example continues, they only have one utility, and it looks like they have, yes, community solar options for procurement, behind the meter renewables, which just about everybody does. Community choice aggregator, they can also take that as an option. Don't have all these other different options, but they do, of course, as most folks do, have the unbundled RECs, etc. So there's a quick snapshot that you can pull for your city or county to look at what your renewable electricity procurement options are in your jurisdiction. Okay, going back to SLED that we mentioned, this is the state and local energy data site that will be sunsetting. There is some further detail there, and here we have housing by type and income. So you can understand with this analysis for all cities, how does the housing stock break out by tenure, owner versus renter, as well as what kind of buildings are those folks living in, and the income. We've broken it out by area median income here. So you can see that here in Rochester, New York, in this example, we have the highest number of housing units of any of these categories in the lowest income category and renter occupied. And those are predominantly multifamily, right? But not large multifamily necessarily. So that can be a challenge if you want to be focusing on equity in your energy transition. And there's a resource to help you understand how to focus efforts there. Let's also look at another tool to help in that effort. This is the low income energy affordability tool and the LEAD tool. It's available online, again, for every state, city, county, And we broke it down even into census tracts here. So you can get some pretty detailed model data on where the energy burden might be the highest. So here again, we're back to a Kingston example, where we found that in comparing Kingston to the US as a whole, to New York State as a whole, Kingston has a higher energy burden than both. And so they are really focused on equity and their clean energy transition and goal. And this is mapping out average energy burden, meaning the percent of annual income spent on utility bills. This is modeled using the American Community Survey data. And here again, we split it out into renter versus owner occupied. You can also layer on a number of units to see how this might break out. And so here we can show that Kingston actually has a very high number of units. 43% of their households are spending 9% or more of their income on utility bills. So it's a pretty big challenge for this city, as an example. And again, that's the LEAD tool with the link down here. Finally, I'm just going to introduce you very quickly to the Renewable Energy Atlas. And this is an example for Kingston where we pulled feasible small project sites. This is again looking at that hydro opportunity where we've seen it's very low cost. And where might those opportunities be? These show the actual points along rivers and streams where there might be a non-powered dam or other feasible small project sites. And again, that's the Renewable Energy Atlas with the link here. Okay, that brings us to a lot of talking from me. I'm really looking forward to hearing your questions. And so I will turn it over to Christine at this point. She's going to run a poll to see how you might envision using the SLOPE tool. We're really looking for your feedback as it is a beta platform and we want to be improving it according to your needs this year and moving into next. So we'll start with that poll and then I really look forward to hearing your questions.
Great, thank you, Megan. I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll now. So the question is, how do you envision using SLOPE? And go ahead and just select all those that apply. And then we'll get into some questions. And remember, you can ask those questions by typing into the chat box. We don't have sound control available for you as the attendees, so raising your hand won't do much good. So if you have a question, please type it in. Okay, we'll give it a few more moments. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And then I'm going to share results. Okay. So it looks like our highest percentage, 43%, multi-jurisdictional research or analysis, 40% is city energy planning, 28 is county energy planning, 13 is state energy, and then we have our not sure category, 32%. So I'm going to go ahead and hide that. So now up on your screen is Megan's contact info, and we'll just kind of leave that up during our Q&A. So, and actually, this is kind of a good segue to the first question that I'm going to ask you, Megan. 40% of our respondents mentioned city energy planning as a way to envision using this tool. So the question is, you indicated that this data will be available by cities eventually. So in particularly for this question in the Midwest states, there are a lot of townships and towns that are not city, that are minor civil division jurisdictions. So they're not cities or villages, but they're smaller than a county government. Will this data be available for townships and towns?
That is a great question. It goes right to my heart. Thank you. We spend a lot of time trying to figure out, okay, how do we define a city? There are multiple different ways, as you indicate with the question, to define a city. And so we started out over 5 years ago with the Cities Leading Through Energy Analysis and Planning project, where we're trying to fill the gap with data for cities, because there's a lot of data available for states and even counties, maybe utility service territories, but cities were lacking in just data availability. And so we set out to model for cities, and it's a unique problem and gap. And we decided that we wanted to expand our definition beyond incorporated places, which is the Census Division definition, to also include when they are coterminous and not overlapping minor civil divisions, to include townships and towns. And so in the Midwest, we don't include townships when they are overlapping with a town or a city that's incorporated. But we do include all minor civil divisions in the Northeast, and that includes Pennsylvania. So we have data for, it's over 1,000 jurisdictions in Pennsylvania, because there's so many crazy different minor civil divisions there. And as an example, now in Massachusetts, it's nice and neat. There's 351, towns and cities. They're all coterminous. Nobody overlaps. It gets a little weird in other places. But I really wanted to make sure that we included that model data for those smaller communities, because that's really in many ways, the focus. Larger cities tend to have the resources, the staff, the data available to do some of this planning, whereas smaller jurisdictions do not. So we wanted to make sure we targeted those jurisdictions and provided the data to the best of our abilities, which did mean we modeled data down to cities with single-digit populations. The data is not very good at that scale, but at least we're trying to cover all jurisdictions at all scales to the extent possible. So yes, we do include minor civil divisions for some states where they're not overlapping with townships. So New Jersey has townships included. Midwestern states don't always, but they will have jurisdictions that are incorporated places. And so look through SLED and the different the data sets that I mentioned, the suite of data sets. You'll see that there are listed. So for example, in Pennsylvania, I think there are 12 Jeffersons of various, township, town, city, whatever. It gets a little confusing. So we try to parse that out in the suite of data that you see, the lookup tables. You'll see next to the city name, town, city, township, TWP, that kind of thing. So we can parse out, which of these 12 different Jeffersons are we talking about here? So great question. Thank you.
We'll kind of bounce off that one. So if we could go up a level to like our regional planning commission type level, are there any plans for these type of regional aggregates? And the person asking the question says that this would benefit metro or non-metro regions, from the transportation perspective. So those regional planning commissions, is there, an aggregate for that?
Not at this time, but it is where we're trying to go, right? So you can pull the data for all of the jurisdictions within your planning region, and it will be standardized according to the same methodology. So in that way, I'm hoping it can still be useful. We're working to retain data at the sub-jurisdictional level to the extent possible. So we've modeled out many of these data sets at either the road segment, in the case of transportation level, or the census block level in the case of commercial buildings and residential energy consumption, such that we can aggregate up to different jurisdictions, be it a utility service territory and maybe a planning region that has some different aggregations of jurisdictions in the future. So for now, you can't select whatever planning organization, regional RPO you have, but you can certainly select all the jurisdictions within that and aggregate it up yourself.
Okay, thanks. All right, next question. Could you talk through out loud your thoughts on how a university might use this type of data to influence their energy plans? Do you see an opportunity? If you could kind of talk out
I
loud about that.
do. Obviously, our focus has been on state and local jurisdictions. However, there's a lot of information here that I think would be relevant to universities. For example, what is the energy efficiency potential? You might fall into the commercial category, right, in your state for jurisdictions. If you're looking at some residential facilities within that university, what are the most cost-effective and energy-saving measures for electricity and fuel savings? You could look at the RESstock data here. Also, if you're looking at different renewable procurement options, you can look at the different potential in your jurisdiction, be it city, well, county or state at this point, and see what kinds of opportunities there might be. You know, if you're in a university in downtown Denver, you might say, okay, we don't have a whole lot of opportunity for utility scale PV, but maybe we could look at some contracts over in the Eastern Plains here, as an example, as a PPA, purchase agreement. You could also look at what are the costs of those technologies in my area, and what might my opportunities be for procurement. You could look at your jurisdiction in the data set that I mentioned, right, for renewable procurement options. So I think that it still can be useful in those ways as far as opportunities and costs for clean energy.
Thank you. So when we're calculating costs for energy, what elements are actually taken into considerations, like manufacturing, transportation, acquisitions, installation? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Can you repeat that? I want to make sure I get this right.
Oh yeah, sure. So when calculating costs for energy, what elements are taken into consideration?
Okay. It depends on the form of energy. Okay, well, you're talking about costs of energy. So let's go to the levelized cost of energy here. LCOE is fraught with risk and misperceptions, right? There's a whole published paper on the model that we use to develop these costs. It's pulled from the Regional Energy Deployment System model. And the levelized cost of energy for each technology based on the particular resource region or balancing area, so that it's pre-localized, takes into consideration a whole host of things. It's described in a little bit more detail how we applied them here in this document that I'm pulling up that you can link to straight from Slope. So lots of assumptions have to go into that, right? And some of them are listed here. Part of those assumptions are, what kind of capacity are we talking about when we say whatever different technology we're thinking of? So here we've listed the capacity assumptions. We also try to align each technology and their associated modeled cost with the with the annual technology baseline. So you'll see those links here. So you can get detailed data on what are those assumptions for this representative technology, right? Because when you say hydro, it could mean many, many different things and many different assumptions. So we've tried to provide as much data as possible to help folks understand exactly what goes into that cost estimate. So there's some details here, there's some details in the report that talks about the tool, and there's some further detail for each technology in the representative technology descriptions in the annual technology baseline data, which is also a great resource for projected costs over time for different technologies. I think that's what the question was aiming at. And so, yes, there's a lot of different assumptions. Let me know if there's further detail that you want on that.
Sure. Well, we're not going to veer too far away from cost. Can you talk a little bit more about how you could use this tool to project different energy commodity costs for the next 20 to 30 years? Is there a way to look at this by state or multiple states, nationally? Can we do this projection at all?
Now, the word commodity in there it kind of differentiates from the last question, right? So what we've done here is for commodity-based energy resources or technologies, meaning natural gas, coal, nuclear, so there's basically the fossil fuels, there are commodity costs built in to these cost projections, right? But it goes beyond that. So in levelized cost of energy, we're also building in the cost of operation and maintenance for these technologies. We're building in the capital costs for construction. We're building in labor costs, and those are regionalized. So there's a lot of different components in there beyond just the commodity cost, but they are certainly included for fossil fuels. They are not for renewables because they are not commodities and they're essentially free. If that makes sense.
Right. Okay.
Now, the technology to extract them are not. So all those capital costs for new construction and operation and maintenance over time are definitely included here.
So does the slope platform show a potential to convert electricity, the energy efficiency, the analysis? So can it show potential to convert electricity from coal to natural gas as a transition away from fossil fuels? And then the question goes on and says, likewise, does the energy burden analysis show potential reduction in cost in greenhouse gas emissions by increasing the use of natural gas?
Okay. That's a lot of questions.
We got some humdingers, don't we? Yeah.
These good questions. I love it. Keep them coming. Okay. So there's kind of two pieces of that. Well, three.
Right.
Let me see if I can parse it out, right? Let's tackle first. What I'm hearing is the transition from coal to natural gas. Here we're not making any assumptions, but we're just projecting out the cost of different technologies. So to answer that question, you can look at modeled levelized cost of energy, LCOE. You can see that up here we have black is coal. Coal is projected to be one of the higher cost technologies over time. The lighter blue here are the natural gas, and there's three different kinds: combustion turbine, combined cycle, and combined cycle with carbon sequestration and storage. And they're all below coal, essentially. All right, let's, okay, sorry, it's not liking me, but let's take out some of these renewables and just look at, we've got natural gas and coal over time, right? So this is nuclear, I believe, up here behind coal, right? If we put coal back, this is what we can do for you. We're not going to tell you what it's going to cost to close your coal plants and build new natural gas. Well, we're going to tell you what it would cost on a per megawatt hour for coal versus natural gas. That's about all we can do. There's plenty of other research that can help you along those other, more detail in there, right? So we can see that renewables, at least utility scale PV, which is still up here, is projected to be lower cost than natural gas in all forms. And certainly hydropower is, and land-based wind, etc. Okay, so then the other, I think, piece of that question that some folks might be wondering is, what are the costs of switching end uses, right? Electrification of end uses, as an example, for cooking and heating in buildings. That can be a cost because oftentimes electricity is higher cost than natural gas on an MMBTU basis, per MMBTU. So we've done some modeling in Kingston on buildings and looked at, yes, the energy efficiency measures that will save you the most energy are fuel switching. Heat pumps were the most energy efficiency and cost saving measure in the city of Kingston, and it comes up quite often across the country. So that means that they're saving so much energy by switching from a boiler or a furnace plus AC plus the rest of it to a heat pump, which does cooling and heating, that it offsets the cost of switching from natural gas to electricity, which is a bit higher expense. So I hope that kind of answers your question. We do get into, if you're looking at fuel saving potential and electricity, you'll see heat pump come up here in some of these, right? Ductless heat pump is down here in pink. Displaces electric baseboard today, will be a fuel saving measure, right? So that's kind of where those technologies come in as far as electrification of end uses in buildings. Okay, now there was a third part of that question, and I'm trying to remember. Help me out here, Christine.
Sure. So the last part on the energy burden analysis. The question is likewise, okay, does the energy burden analysis show potential reduction in cost and greenhouse gas emissions by increasing use of natural gas for residents?
We don't have projections
in energy
burden, right? So if we go to the lead tool here, we're just modeling out the percentage of income spent on utility bills. It is broken out by, so here in Kingston, these are 0 to 30% of area median income population. Owner-occupied buildings have the highest energy burden. Broken out by dark green here in electricity, gas, and then other, which would be heating oil, propane, and the like. So here you can at least see how that energy burden is broken out. We don't project as far as fuel switching and what that impact will be. I'm sure there's more research out there that can do that, but the lead tool does not.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Trying to decide which ones are more relevant here. Okay, here we go. So can you please differentiate between rooftop solar versus larger solar farm model in terms of cost?
Yes, it's coming. Okay, what we have currently on slope for cost is utility scale cost, right? Let's put all these guys back in. And We're going to take geothermal off because it squashes it. Okay, so what you see here is concentrating solar power, land-based wind, hydro, utility scale PV is behind here. I can tell you it's going to be a lot lower than you see here. As a former utility scale solar developer, the market rates, if you issue an RFP for a solar, you'll get much lower cost than that. In Colorado, it'll be about $20 a megawatt hour for a large scale PPA. We don't have LCOE for distributed resources. And that's a big part of what we're building in this calendar year. We're going to be modeling out the levelized cost of distributed solar, so commercial scale and residential scale PV, rooftop, as well as distributed wind and essentially distributed geothermal. So we're going to be looking at the levelized cost of heating and opportunities for district heating from geothermal approaches and heat pump approaches. So I'm really excited to add that this calendar year. By the end of the year, we'll be adding those comparisons. Now you can, in the meantime, use the annual technology baseline. If you go to ATB, they do have costs projected over time by technology, and they have it broken out by utility scale PV, commercial scale, and residential. So that's a great way to find those data points now.
Great, thank you. This came up in a couple questions, so I want to make sure that it's reiterated. Is mapping available for renewable energy generation besides hydro, like for solar and wind?
Okay, I think you're looking at, I think the question is referring to the screenshot I showed for the Renewable Energy Atlas. And if that's the case, then certainly the Renewable Energy Atlas maps out many different technologies and the generation potential. It's not a point source lat long for other generation potential, but you can definitely see other technologies, right? So here we have biomass, concentrating solar, geothermal, hydrothermal, hydro, PV, wind, wave, etc. So this is, however, focused more on resource potential rather than generation potential, and this is the Renewable Energy Atlas. On SLOPE, we've focused this more on the generation potential in megawatt hours for all these different technologies, right? So if we look at land-based wind, we have the different mapped generation potential by state and by county, right? So you can see how that breaks out across the US. So lots of potential here in the Midwest for land-based wind as an example, and at the county or balancing area level, and toward the west. So I'm hoping that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. Next question. Okay. Is there one location where all of the modeling methodologies are compiled? And the reason for the question is the person asking says, I work for a federally recognized tribe. Data isn't always available or valid for tribes, so it helps to know more about the models to determine if they are applicable.
I want you to go to the tribal energy atlas. Sorry, new keyboard. I'm washing everything here. We have basically the Renewable Energy Atlas for tribes. It's a great resource, and you can look at all the different tribes mapped and what is the generation potential within tribal boundaries and within a buffer around those tribal boundaries. So
that's great.
you can also look at, you're talking about generation or the methodologies, and they're all described in the different question marks here.
Great.
So please do use that resource. It's a great one.
Wonderful. Thank you. I think maybe we'll wrap up with this last question here. How do you suggest planners apply this tool and this data to fair housing programs?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Yeah, I wanted to give you a last, humdinger before we signed
Thanks.
off.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Sure, no problem.
Well, there we're looking again at equity, right? And mapping out, and I would say there's two resources there. Certainly the low-income energy affordability data tool, the LEAD tool. And there you can look at a mapping of the energy burden by census tract and to see what kind of percentage is spent down to the census tract level modeled. So I think that would get you some more specific data that's very localized to help with some approaches and targeting of plans and programs. You can also look at the Solar for All tool. It also shows census tract level data as far as rooftop PV availability at the census tract level, and it integrates some income data. And unlike the LEAD tool, when you go to that census tract level map, it's got more map layers available. So the LEAD tool, when you go to the census tracts, there's no sort of roads or anything to help you place those census tracts in space, whereas the Solar for All tool does. So I would encourage you to use those two tools, as well as we have a number of different research reports and tools and data sets that you could use for renewable energy opportunities, community solar, for low-income populations, et cetera. So if you just search NREL, don't search within NREL, it's useless. Google NREL and community solar and low-income and the like. So that, again, is the LEAD tool, the Solar for All tool, and then I would just suggest a search because we do have a lot of research on income and renewable opportunities.
Wonderful. Real quick, could you throw your last slide back up with your contact info? Thank you.
Absolutely. Let's end here.
Wonderful. Thank you. So Megan Day, thank you for joining us today. Girl, you're a wealth of knowledge. This was really great. This can be some complicated stuff with just a lot of moving parts. So this was a really great summary of all of the opportunities that are available. Just as a reminder to all of you, don't forget to log those credits, 1.5 CM credits. And we are recording this session and we'll post it up on our YouTube channel. Just search Planning Webcast on YouTube and it'll pop up. And we will also have a PDF of the presentation available to you sometime next week on our webcast webpage. Head over to ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast, where you can also register for our upcoming sessions. So everyone stay smart and safe out there this weekend, and we will talk next time. Thank you, Megan, and thank you, Colorado chapter of APA, and have a good one.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.